Welcome to Introduction to Server History. As always, I'm Professor ratat0ing 8990, and the University Policy Agreement applies to this class as well. If you're in this class, you are most likely a server history major, so before we move on, let's take a look at all the topics we'll be touching on in your degree program. As you can see, right now we're in an Introduction to Server History, going to get a brief overview of all the history from the entire server, and then we'll move on to New Portion History 1, which covers the first half of the history of Newport, and then New Portion History 2. Then we'll move on to History of Minor Nations in the Uncivilized World, and that covers pretty much the whole world except Newport. And then we'll also take a look at archaeology and NPC studies, that's villagers and ruins and things like that, the history of conchism, and then you'll have 3 electives, which hopefully you've chosen by now. And then after all that, you will have a server history capstone project, which will most likely be a dissertation that will be an essay on a history topic of your choosing. So keep that in mind as we move through these courses. I'd like to begin with a quote from Kip Kemboy 35. He said, "You were there when I first arrived and have taken a liking to the world that has been made before me." And that was the most relevant quote to server history that I could find. So historians divide server history into 3 eras typically. Prehistory, which goes from 20 to 13 BK, and that is April 9th to May 12th. The New Portion Age, which runs from 13 BK to 11 AK, May 12th to September 4th, and the Age of Expansion, which runs from 11 AK to the present, that starts at September 4th, and that is the age that we're currently in. So let's take a look at prehistory. This era begins when Newport was founded on day 4, year 20 BK, that's April 9th, 2020, by Lost City 99. And this era is characterized by mass migration from Searcy northwest along Harding Highway to Newport. And along this route, you will find many primitive settlements, a lot of primitive technology. And this era is also characterized by very few historical records of any sort of dates or events. So people have had to figure out when exactly something happened because it was not written down. And little known fact, the April 9th date for the founding of Newport, at best, that's actually just a guess. We know Newport was founded in that same week somewhere, but April 9th was just chosen as the traditional date to say when Newport was actually founded. Key locations for this era of prehistory, Searcy, of course, where everyone spawns, Bald Knob, which is an NPC village along Harding Highway. A lot of people stopped there and made temporary houses. Newport, of course, which will come to be the main settlement at the end of Harding Highway. And Algoa Canopy, which is a forest city located somewhat near Newport. And this town will later be known as the Kingdom of Petra, and you'll see that come up a lot in the other eras. As you can see, here's a map here of the migration from Searcy northwest to Newport, and then you'll have Bald Knob along that route and also Algoa Canopy off to the side. Taking a look at some events that happened in this prehistorical era, the server first opened on day 2, year 18 BK. That corresponds to April 17th. And then quite a few events happened in late April. That's year 17, around 15 BK. But these events don't have dates because, again, there was no historical record in the prehistorical era. First of all, Rage 6838 founded conchism by bringing the magic conch to Newport. This period also marked the beginning of industrialization in Newport, which was characterized by the building of factories, and these allowed New Portions to mass produce blocks and items and begin to build with more advanced building materials. This period also marked the first bureaucracies, and These weren't really governments, but they were the first regulations on the server outside of server law. The first of these bureaucracies to be made was the Newport Department of Urban Planning, which still regulates building codes within the Newport area. And also you have the Departments of Transportation and Sustainability that were founded. Additionally, the Ender Dragon was eventually defeated by new portions on day 4, year 14 BK. That corresponds to May 9th. And around this time marks the beginning of the New Portion Age. This era began when the Newport City Council was formed on day 2, year 13 BK. That's May 12th. And this was the actual first organized government on the server. Additionally, the New Portion Age is characterized by a massive increase in historical records, contrasting with the prehistoric age where there was no historical records. Also, you'll begin to see a development of advanced economies and rapid urban growth in this era. As the name might suggest, the New Portion Age is characterized as well by the dominance of Newport over surrounding nations. It's kind of like Newport is the main character of all the countries in this era, just due to its power and size. And then you'll also notice that new portions in this era have identified anarchy as their main enemy. That's a main theme that comes up a lot in the history of the New Portion Age. A lot of people are coagulating into one government, and the idea of anarchy is something that they want to avoid. Here are two pictures side by side of what Newport looked like from an aerial view at the beginning of this era and at the end of this era, and this just demonstrates the amount of urban growth and economic development that you can see here. Few events that happened in mid-May around 12 BK. A blaze rod shortage happened in Newport, and this is notable because it demonstrates that there are now advanced economies with players relying on each other for specific items, and since no one could acquire blaze rods for a certain amount of time, that had the price of blaze rods and other nether items skyrocketing. On day 3, year 10 BK, that's May 28th, Blartsburg was founded south of Newport by Malachi Brown 523. And the city of Blartsburg, later the sovereign province of Blartsburg, would become Newport's main rival, if it did have any rivals in the New Portion Age. On day 5, year 8 BK, June 9th, Newport celebrated the first Founders Day, and that marked the 2-month anniversary of the founding of the city. Day 3, year 6 BK, on June 17th, that was the Floating Tree Crisis, and this was a conflict between the New Portions and anarchists on the southern border, which were attempting to build what were called anarchist megastructures, really ugly, like buildings that no one wanted, and the anarchists were specifically building them in defiance of the established government, which had regulated against these buildings. And this is an example of Newport's aversion to anarchy. That is what actually caused the Floating Tree Crisis. From around 3 BK to 1 BK in late June and early July, Newport began the transition from a democracy to a constitutional monarchy, and that instated the emperor, and that's why it's now called the First New Portion Empire. On day 1, year 8 AK, on August 19th, was the Carrot Revolution, when the citizens of Newport actually demanded a transition from a constitutional monarchy to an absolute monarchy, and this marked the first emperor which was not bound by constitutional law, and we'll take more of a look at that in New Portion history. The Third Age, the Age of Expansion, began when the Republic of Xanadu was founded on day 2, year 11 AK, September 4th, by Slammerdock. And the founding of Xanadu is notable because it marks the beginning of an increased sense of international community. That's one of the characteristics of this era, where Newport is no longer the main player. There's lots of different countries on the world stage. And this era is also marked by a migration away from old civilizations such as Newport and Blartsburg to establish these new countries. Of course, we also see the decline of Newport as the only major power on the world stage, and the exodus out of Newport also results in stagnation in the development of the city. Unlike the Newportian age, where you can see rapid urban growth, this age is marked by less growth within Newport and more growth outside of the city. And eventually, a lot of these countries will unite to form the Server Federation, which will act as the primary rival of the first Newportian Empire. And of course, both of these major players will now be in a race to stake new claims on land, as you might guess by the name Age of Expansion. Here's a large overview of the world map. As you can see in the center there, we have Newport, Petra, and Blartsburg. These are the old civilizations that Newport dominated the Newportian age, of course. And then you'll have players migrating outward to found new lands such as Xanadu, Hoth, Equinox, and eventually the country that we're in right now, Conchalore. Some major events that happened during this era: Day 1, Year 14, which was September 18th, a cult known as the Cult Establishment attempted to secede from the first Newportian Empire. And this is notable because a lot of other world powers, world leaders came to the defense of the empire. And that's an example of the international community. On Day 1, Year 17, October 3rd, Conchism split into the two main branches you see today. On Day 3, Year 21, October 23rd, Conchalore was founded by ratat0ing 8990 and Malachi Brown 523. And on Day 2, Year 27, November 23rd, Conchalore joined Xanadu, Blartsburg, and later Petra to form the Server Federation, which was the first major democracy since the Newport City Council. And I just want to reiterate that the Federation had 3 founding members. These were Xanadu, Conchalore, and Blartsburg. And it was later joined by the Kingdom of Petra, which seceded from the empire to join the Federation. And the dynamic you'll see now playing out on the world stage is that the empire and the Federation are kind of rival superpowers. And that concludes our introduction to server history.